Good afternoon from the Media Center Ukraine, Odesa. You can watch us online, both on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page. And if you have questions, you can ask them online. Just scan the QR code that you can now see on the screen. On the 25th of November, we will see the traditional activities, 16 days against violence, and this is our current topic. Our speakers are Liudmyla Akimova, coordinator of the UNFPA project Citizen Communities Free from Domestic Violence, Victoria Pleshko, coordinator of the Center for Assistance to Survivors, and Kateryna Shalyapina, deputy head of the NGO Way Home, the head of the center supporting women. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. And let's start with the action, with the event that will traditionally take place on the 25th of November. What information are you going to provide this year? And Liudmyla, the floor is yours. Good afternoon. It has become a tradition since 2000, when Ukraine joined this world event, 16 days against violence. But the world started marking the day in 1991, and we can see that Ukraine has been actively involved in this event for the last 5-7 years. And this is very important because the legislation has been changed, more oriented on the victims of domestic violence. The legislation is also aimed at creating the network of specialized services in the city of Odesa, in the Odesa Oblast. And I would like to remind about the event itself. From the 25th of November to the 10th of December, there is the whole range of events reminding about the importance of non-discrimination and non-violence. On the 25th of November, this action starts. This is the Day of White Stripe, and this is an international day fighting with the violence against young women and girls. And there is also an international day on fighting AIDS and HIVs. And there is also the International Day on the 3rd of December supporting people with disabilities. On the 5th of December, there is the day of fighting with slavery, and also there is a day of volunteer. So there is the whole range of events aimed at different topics, and the 10th of December is the Human Rights Day, and on this will be the day when we will summarize the results of all the activities during 16 days, and we will also improve our activities to minimize these phenomena. We cannot say that it will be fully overcome, but we should work in this direction. UNFPA initiates very important events marking the start of the campaign. We also signed the manifest. In 2022, there was the action, and the campaign named the sensitivity helps people. And also this year, we would like to focus on different types of violence. And also, the government calls for uniting efforts and the priorities given to victims of the military conflict in Ukraine. With the start of the full-scale war, Ukraine has seen the new forms of violence, and one of the types is the sexual violence related to the military conflict. This is a very difficult topic and complex issue. It requires a lot of changes to the Ukrainian legislation and approaches. And I would like to say that the UNFPA and other international associations are involved in activities to support the victims of the military conflict. And that was the initiative of the government, supported by the foundation. in the forms of different centers supporting victims, and today we will learn more about this. And this year we will have two key events. There will be a run calling for uniting efforts, the victims of the tortures of the war, and also to explain to our population that the domestic violence is a crime and it should not be silenced. The victims should refer to get help. There are tools to help such people, and this is not that difficult to refer to help as it might seem. And we also have a chain or network of services in Ukraine that can support the victims of domestic violence and other types of violence. And the run will not take place in Odesa because of the safety and security issues. But it will be conducted in such cities as Mukachevo, Ivano-Frankivsk, in the west of Ukraine, that are not shelled those heavily. Children of different ages, elderly, young people, everyone will participate in the run. And there will be a TV bridge. And also our diaspora of Ukrainians from Chicago will participate in the run, and there will be a special TV broadcast to exchange the impressions and ideas. And there will be one more event that will be hosted by at least 40 cities of Ukraine, which is the part of the project Cities and Communities Free from Domestic Violence, which is called the Steps to Support. What is the sense of this event, of this activity? It will start on the 24th of November in the park of Gorky at 1 p.m. in Odesa. There will be 8 intermediary stations, and every person will be able to follow the path of a victim, to learn about success stories, to learn more about services that can help in such situations. Every station will have information about the possible support, about the sources of support, resources, QR codes, telephone numbers, and QR codes, and other contact details where people can get support. And the last station will be the place to take picture in the special framework bearing the name 16 Days Against Violence. People will be able to take pictures there, and this will be also the manifestation of uniting efforts against violence against people. 85% of the people addressing are women and girls. But also we can see the increased number of boys and men suffering the violence, including the violence related to the military conflict. And this is very difficult to identify such cases and to support people, because many people who have gone through that do not identify this as a violence, because for people it's only raping. But when it comes to sexual violence related to the military conflicts, they have different forms. When people are forced to get off clothes at checkpoints, when men and women are kept in one room, not meeting any sanitary norms, when some strangers touch some parts of body, and this is intimidating of people and threatening with the rape of relatives in exchange of some data. And all these things are manifestation of the sexual violence. And our citizens should be more aware of that to be able to refer for help. And nowadays, we can have a lot of tools, a lot of resources. People can get different types of aid, including mental aid, because documenting of such a case is not the first step. A lot of people, they refer to NGOs, doctors, psychologists, and not to the police. There have been 260 applications with regard to sexual violence and armed conflict submitted to the prosecutor's office, and we understand that this is not the number reflecting the real situation. We don't know the exact numbers nowadays, but in the past, we had information that 21,000 people suffered any type of violence. 8,000 people were tortured and killed. But these are outdated numbers. We didn't know the exact number of such people nowadays, but we know that there are victims. And when it comes to the city of Odesa, we have a well-developed network and chain of services. These are 2 shelters, 2 daily centers, mobile teams, crisis rooms, NGOs. Liudmyla, we have an online question to you from Zoya Melnik and Vera Zaporozhets. These are human rights activists. Where could the victims of gender-based or home violence, if they were not accepted at the shelter? I am not in control of shelters' activities. These are municipal institutions that are coordinated by local authorities, namely the Center of Social Services. But there are also shelters owned by NGOs, and victims can refer there. We also have daily centers, but if there are the cases of refusals, and you need to understand that this is impossible for a person to get shelter by themselves. We do not provide contact details of shelters, and they are daily centers, and there is an algorithm. This is department of the social police of the municipal council that can refer people to the police, and a person cannot get to a shelter by their own. We cannot disclose the details, and unfortunately we've seen such cases in Ukraine when shelters were attacked by trespassers and by those known to commit violence. And that's why, according to the Ukrainian legislation, we cannot disclose contact details and whereabouts of shelters. But there are different stakeholders that can refer people to different shelters. This is the center supporting survivals and different NGOs. On the website of the Odesa Municipal Council, you can find all the stakeholders involved in these activities. But this is really very upsetting if a person in need of support was refused. And we have enough places. One shelter is for 25 places, 19, and the second one for 19 places. And the crisis room has 2 beds. 4 beds, and that's why we have enough beds, enough places for people to support victims and survivors. It cannot be a problem, and perhaps there is a human factor, the negligence, but it could not be. We should not have such problems in Odesa, because there is the whole network of specialized services that can provide such support. If there are contact details of such a person, it would be great if I can contact this person to understand what happened, because this is the violation of legislation. Thank you. Let's give the floor to other participants of our press conference. First, Victoria, which support women can get when it comes to domestic violence? The center supporting the survivors is supported by UNFPA and the bodies and the self-government bodies. And everyone suffering from different types of violence can refer to us. These are, for example, the people from the occupied territories, from the hostility zones. They can refer to us to get mental and legal support, and also social accompaniment of our social worker to solve almost all issues, to be able to adapt and to deal with initial requirements. We also cooperate with shelters, NGOs that can provide accommodation to such people. Because initially we should meet basic needs like accommodation, nutrition, safe place. For a person to be able to deal with other difficulties. And now I would like to give floor to Kateryna Shalyapina, the head of the Center Supporting Women. And I understand that there is a course for rehabilitation of a woman, a survivor of domestic violence. I would like to add some information to what has been mentioned by Liudmyla. They are not only municipal centers, but are all shelters. And for example, our NGO Way Home offers a shelter, which is the part of this chain of services. And after the meeting, I can provide more details, and I can share with you the telephone number where people can get legal and mental support and also accommodation. How women are returned to socially adjusted life. We have a case manager for that. This is how we work. Because every time violence can have different manifestations and forms. So this can be psychological violence, economical violence. It's also could be also the violence, sexual violence in armed conflict, and some other types of violence. This could be. We can provide social support if a woman was dependent and from offender. We can offer such economic support and. When it comes to legal support, this is about alimony and some other legal support, and there could be the cases of violence against minors, and it's really very painful. And the rehabilitation process depends on an individual case. And as far as I understand, there are questions. Just a clarification. Could you share more details about the shelter, which is not a municipal institution? Because as far as I understand, that was the question of our colleagues. If it is difficult to get to a municipal shelter, and sometimes such municipal shelters cannot meet the needs of people, what non-state shelters are there? Yes, there are such shelters, and women can address to us if they cannot get support from municipal institutions. And we're supported by Ursula Zelde Health Foundation. The NGO Way Home was able to open a civil shelter to support survivors, female survivors of violence. We provide legal support, healthcare. There is also a kind of a nursery for children, where women can leave their children and to get all the services needed. We provide social and humanitarian support. And 090 2030, this is the telephone number that you can contact. We cannot share the address and whereabouts of the shelter, even the geolocation should be turned off while women stay in our shelter. Ursula Zonde Health Foundation supports our shelter. And if you allow, I would like to provide more information about 16 days against violence. The activity will not take place on the 24th of November when it will be announced, but during 16 days in all areas of the city, we will be able to give more than 1,500 roses, white roses, 100 roses every day. The aim of this activity is for women to share their stories. There is no limitations with regard to age or economical status, and with white roses, we will also provide the card with a telephone number where women suffering from violence can get support. And, for example, the Center for Assistance to Survivors will be also involved in this activity, and there will be self-defense classes for women as well. And the activity will take place during 16 days. We're supported by the International Medical Corps, USAID, and we can have such a wide-scale activity. We also have one more question from colleagues, and our host will read it as soon as he gets it. And I have a question, and you say that you are going to support women with white roses, but there are 15% of men suffering from violence. There is kind of discrimination here. There will be no discrimination because at the start of the activity, there will be a trade fair of the specialized social services. People will be able to get a lot of materials there, and for men, with the support of the UN Foundation, we have a separate hotline for them, 242345. This is the hotline, the national hotline for men suffering from violence. We also have the governmental hotline 1545 that operates 24/7. There is the national hotline La Strada, 116-123 for grown-ups, 116-111 for children. There is a psychological platform which is called Aurora. It is very difficult to Google this platform, and there people can get advice or be consulted. All people suffering from any type of violence, GBV, sexual violence and armed conflict, domestic violence, and this platform, the professional psychologists from Ukraine will provide support to such people, and this hotline and this platform has been also established with the support of the UNFPA. First of all, offering mental support to people suffering from any type of violence, with possibility for the referring of these people to other services and specialized services. On the 24th of November, we are going also to start the initiative, EUAM, and the Ministry of Internal Affairs. There will be 5 images with episodes of different types of violence, and that will be kind of a test of what opinion the citizens will have. And the name of this project is a Witness, and this is very interesting for us to test people to understand what response we can expect from them to different types of violence. And this test is very important for us to understand how we should move forward, because awareness raising is a very important part when it comes to preventing domestic violence. And the aim of this activity is to improve the knowledge of people about types and forms of violence, to understand what is the violence, to understand that this is a crime. And it is also very important for people to understand where they can refer to. Because despite the activities of the local authorities or international partners, But if local communities tolerate such cases, will not be able to minimize this phenomenon. When it comes to domestic violence, other types of violence, this is the issue of safety and security of the community, starting from children to elderly. And we believe that awareness-raising campaigns should be the priority of activities of any community, and it should be the focus of NGOs and authorities. We need to raise awareness of our people about that. A lot of events have been planned for schools, universities, and we have two civil shelters, Way Home, and also the shelter of NGO Vira Nadia Любовь. And that also supports these activities. And if a person faces any manifestation of sexual violence and is in need of mental support and support of gynecologists, at the 7th Maternity Hospital, we have the office offering complex support. And if there are the cases of sexual violence, these people could refer there anonymously. And also the women among IDPs who have problems with their health, they were supported, they get good services at that office. We also have one more question from Zoya Melnik and Vira Zaporozhets. And have there been any changes in the NGO Way Home when this NGO was taken from its founder, Sergei Kostin? That was a very interesting question. Sergei Kostin was the president of Way Home for more than 20 years. And we need to understand that now when it comes to the war, there is such a great demand from the community that we had to make changes. We have the board. The president was re-elected, and now Oksana Hilchenko is also the president of the foundation, and she was also a founder of President. So this foundation was not taken from the mentioned person, and I don't know how it has affected the services provided, because I have not been working there since its opening. But I can say that we have become more transparent. We are working at developing horizontal links with the different organizations to be able to increase our support. Our charitable foundation was founded more than 26 years ago, and this perhaps the evidence that we can provide efficient support, but this is up for our beneficiaries to decide. Perhaps Ms. Akimova can also assess how effective the Way Home was with Sergei, former president, and what is the situation. But was through election that Sergei Kostin was substituted by another president. And but I know Sergei Kostin from the 1990s, where also had in the Department of the Family and Youth. And back then, very important, strong organizations were established, and thanks God, they are still effective in the Odesa Oblast. I know that Sergei is a very experienced person, and he organized a lot of different interesting projects, but I think this is up for the board to decide, but I don't know the details. I was also surprised to learn about this change in summer. That was the advisory board meeting that elected another president. I learned about it in September. I was surprised, but this is life. But it is very important to ensure efficiency of organization for people, for it to be able to support other people. Now I contact more with Kateryna Shalyapina, and I can see her effectiveness and the effectiveness of her team. And actually, I want to come back to that issue that was mentioned by Zoe in her question that no aid was provided, and we made in the Department of Family and Youth the directorate dealing with the issues of violence and human trafficking. And I know that the team is very strong there, and we are always ready to respond to such cases, but there is always a human factor. And when it comes to the system supporting of survivors of different types of violence, I'm, for example, preoccupied with with justice, because we can see a low level of the punishment or sanctions, because the fine which is there, it is 340 hryvnias. This is ridiculous. This is not a sanction. This is not a punishment. And I believe that we should just exclude that. How it is related to the topic of our briefing today. We can always discuss the gaps in the judicial system, but this is about the excess of victims and survivors. And yes, and the problems and gaps with justice is our challenge, and the situation should be improved. The network of services is there are a lot of activities, but this is very important for victims or survivors of violence to be sure that the offenders will be brought to accountability. There are very cruel cases of domestic violence. There are homicides, and it is very important to stop domestic violence on time to prevent homicides or injuries, including children. This is a challenge, and the challenge for municipal council to properly work with offenders, with courts, with justice, with access to fair justice. That's why I've decided to mention, because I am now concerned about the information provided by Zoe about the case when a person could not get help in a municipal shelter. We should deal with this case. And what about the Odesa Oblast? How many homicides are there because of the domestic violence? It is very difficult to talk about statistics, because this is a criminal offense identified as a homicide. And I also have a folder of such cases, and I can see that every month there are at least one case. Have you seen such cases when a woman referred to you, and after that she was killed by her husband? I've seen several cases when a case was brought to court, and there were cases when we were able to stop violence. And I'm happy that we have such an opportunity. Sometimes people address to us directly or not directly, and there are 10,000 of addresses, and in every district we have the emergency group headed by the deputy head of the Department on Humanitarian Issues. And also in 2022, we also have the job, the position for a responsible person accompanying the cases. We're the only city in Ukraine where we have such form of support. But everything depends on a person involved in providing help. This is a human factor, and we understand that unfortunately not in all cases the victim survivors are able to get an adequate support, but still people should refer to us. And I know that there are women that believe that domestic violence is something normal, and they are ready to be victims, if you allow. The violence does not start with beating. So beating is just one of the stage. It could be like psychological, economical violence, abuse, some prohibitions. The next stage is beating. Then there could be some severe injuries, and it could lead to lethal cases. That's why we say that we should raise awareness about violence. And violence is not only about beating. This is the decreased level of safe security and an inadequate attitude to yourself, because people that get used to being humiliated, to being beaten, and we should raise awareness about these factors. Because when it comes to relations between men, women, any like relations with regard to a victim, is that abusers they just change the attitude. This could be economical, physical, mental abuse. Sometimes it could lead to severe beatings, resulting in homicides. And our citizens should understand that domestic violence is systematic. This is not single cases. When it comes to statistics, there are 8,000 of claims, and only 560 are has some evidence to prove it. Quite often, after the police arrives, women are not ready to sign their statements. They change their minds. And we have such cases when the same woman calls for police for 10 times during one quarter. But then violence becomes normal for a woman, and she even doesn't think about her child. And this is not okay for a child to live in such a violent environment. And in 80% cases are identified as mental or psychological abuse or violence. And there are a lot of different types, markers of the violence, like humiliation, etc. And we should talk about this not only during that event, 16 days against violence. We should talk about this all the time, and I would like to call for mass media to increase such meetings with the stakeholders, with success stories of female survivors of domestic violence. We have such success cases when women and their children were able to get out of the situations they had been facing for decades, and now they have a completely different life. And such meetings are very important. And on the 24th of February, at the mentioned stations, we will demonstrate such success stories. And there are a lot of such cases. It is a difficult path, but we could achieve the result. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. Thank you for joining us tonight, and we'll continue at 1:30.